Have you ever wished to rewind time and go back to change some of your regrets? Just go back and fix the life that was now ruined? Well, I did, and never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that my wish would become true. The estate was glowing with string lights, floral arrangements, and the clinking of champagne glasses. My sister Diana's engagement party was nothing short of a fairy tale, and honestly, it made me feel like I'd stumbled into someone else's dream. Scratch that. Her dream. Diana had always been the star, the golden child who turned every room into her stage. I was just there. Lydia, can you take these to the terrace? My mother asked, shoving a tray of hors d'oeuvres into my hands without even waiting for a response. I wanted to roll my eyes, but what was the point? This was typical. Diana basked in the spotlight, and I played the background character. That's just how it always was. I weaved through the sea of guests, all dressed in their finest, chatting and laughing like they'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. As I placed the tray on a nearby table, I caught a glimpse of Diana in her custom-made gown, practically glowing as her fiancé toasted to their future. Everyone cheered, their adoration for her nearly palpable. "Isn't she stunning?" one of our relatives gushed to another. "She's so accomplished. Lydia could learn a thing or two." Ouch, I turned away, pretending I hadn't heard. I was used to the comparisons, but they still stung. Diana had a high-powered job, a picture-perfect fiancé, and the unwavering adoration of our parents. Meanwhile, I had a decent job and a tendency to fade into the background. I tried to stay busy, hoping no one would notice the growing lump in my throat. But then, as I walked past the dining room, I heard it. My parents' voices, low but unmistakable. "I just don't know what we're going to do about Lydia," my mother said. "She's fine, I guess, but she's never going to be like Diana." "She's a lost cause," my father added. "At least Diana makes us proud." Lost cause. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood frozen in the hallway, every ounce of self-worth draining from me. I wanted to storm in and say something, anything, but my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I turned and walked out into the garden, my chest tightening with every step. The next thing I knew, my vision blurred, and the world tilted. I felt my knees give way, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses faded into a muffled hum. Then, nothing. I wasn't awake, but I could feel everything happening around me. The EMTs loading me into an ambulance, and a group of concerned faces hovering over me. Diana was there, looking less concerned and more annoyed, as if I'd intentionally stolen her thunder. My parents were there too, fussing over me, but I could see it in their eyes. The irritation, the disappointment. "Always dramatic," my mother muttered under her breath, shaking her head. I wished I could sink into the ground and disappear. I could feel the weight of their judgment crushing me. This was supposed to be Diana's perfect night, and somehow I'd managed to make myself the problem again. No one even bothered to come with me to the hospital. When I opened my eyes, the world around me wasn't the hospital or the bustling engagement party. Instead, I was surrounded by nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. The space was vast and shimmering, filled with floating, ticking clocks, their hands moving at erratic speeds. A soft swirling light pulsed around me, bathing everything in an otherworldly glow. It was like stepping into a dream, a strange, unnerving dream. I sat up slowly, half expecting someone to pop out and explain this elaborate prank. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing into the vastness. No answer. Then, I saw him. A figure emerged from the shadows, or rather the light shifted, and he seemed to step out of it. He was tall, cloaked in deep, flowing robes that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. His face was obscured, but his eyes, piercing and infinite, held a strange mix of warmth and authority. The ticking of the clock seemed to grow louder as he approached. "Lydia," he said, his voice low and resonant. It wasn't a question. He knew who I was. "Who are you?" I stammered, my heart racing. "And where am I? What's going on?" "I am Kronos," he said simply, "and you are in the space between moments, a realm where time bends and choices shape reality." Kronos, the name felt familiar, like I'd read it in some mythology book years ago. "This has to be a dream," I muttered, shaking my head. "I passed out at the party, didn't I? This is just my brain playing tricks on me." He tilted his head slightly, as if amused. A dream, perhaps. Or perhaps the moment your life has been waiting for. I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Okay, Kronos, if that's really your name, why am I here? What is this place? You've reached a crossroads, Lydia, he said, his tone calm but firm. Your life, as it stands, is tethered by regret, resentment, and self-doubt. The choices of your past have shaped this reality, but they are not immutable. I blinked. Tethered by regret? I mean, sure, I've had a rough time, but... He held up a hand, silencing me. You are not here to defend yourself. You are here because you seek change. I can offer you the opportunity to revisit pivotal moments in your life, moments that have led you to this breaking point. Revisit the past? It sounded insane, but there was something about his presence, an undeniable sense of authority that made me pause. You're saying I can go back? Change things? Yes, Kronos replied. But be warned, altering the past is not without consequence. Each choice will create ripples, some beneficial, others unpredictable. Are you prepared to accept that risk? My mind was spinning. If this was real, if I truly had the chance to rewrite my story, how could I not take it? But the thought of unpredictable ripples made my stomach churn. What happens if I say no? I asked hesitantly. Then you return to the life you left behind, he said simply. The choice is yours. I thought about the engagement party, the whispers, the judgment, the constant feeling of being invisible in my own family. My heart ached at the memory of my parents dismissing me, of Diana soaking up every ounce of their pride, while I was left to carry trays and clean up their messes. I didn't want to go back to that. Not without a fight. I'll do it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I want to change things. Kronos nodded, and the clocks around us began ticking faster, their hands spinning wildly. Very well, but remember, Lydia, the past is a fragile thing. Handle it with care. Before I could ask what that meant, the swirling light engulfed me, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, the surreal void of clocks and swirling light was gone. Instead, I was standing in my childhood home. The smell of freshly baked cookies filled the air, and sunlight streamed through the kitchen window. For a moment, I thought Kronos had dropped me back into some random memory, but then I heard it. Lydia, can you come here, please? My mother's voice rang out, warm but with that familiar edge of expectation. My chest tightened. I remembered this day. How could I not? This was the day my parents sat me down and gently told me it was time to put my silly little art dreams aside and focus on helping Diana. It was all for the family, they said, but we all knew it was for her. I stepped into the living room, my heart pounding. Sure enough, there they were, Mom and Dad sitting on the couch, their faces a mix of encouragement and firmness, and Diana lounging in the armchair with her signature smug smile. She didn't even look up from her phone. It was like she already knew the outcome. Lydia, we've been talking, Mom started, motioning for me to sit, and we think it's best if you put your art school plans on hold. Diana's ballet training is so expensive, and she's got such a bright future ahead of her. And I stared at them, the weight of their words hitting me all over again. But I've been saving for that program for years, I said, my voice trembling. It's my dream. Diana snorted softly, not bothering to hide her disdain. Dreams don't pay bills, Lydia. And honestly, you're so talented. You can pick it up later. Later, I repeated, my voice hollow, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. This was my chance, wasn't it? Kronos had sent me back here to change this moment. I just had to say no. I had to stand up for myself. But as I opened my mouth to speak, my mother cut in. Sweetheart, think of the family. Diana's already been accepted into the academy. If we don't help her now, she might lose her spot. You'll understand when you're older. The words stuck in my throat. I felt the old fear rising. The fear of disappointing them, of causing conflict. Okay, I heard myself say, almost automatically. If it's what's best for the family? Diana smirked, and Mom patted my hand as if I'd made the right choice. Inside, I felt like I'd crumbled all over again. And just like that, the scene dissolved. I was back in the void with Kronos, his piercing eyes fixed on me. You hesitated, he said simply. I dropped my gaze, shame burning in my chest. It's not easy. No, he agreed. But if you want a different future, you must choose differently. Are you ready to try again? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yes, I'm ready. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. I stood in the middle of our living room, my hands trembling as I stared at the shattered vase scattered across the floor. I remembered this moment vividly, the ache of injustice, the betrayal. I was 12, and this was the day Diana set me up to take the fall for something I didn't do. My parents were standing in the doorway, their faces a mix of disappointment and anger. Diana, as always, looked composed, even a little smug, her hands clasped in front of her, as if butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. She broke it, Diana said, her voice calm and confident. I told her not to touch it, but she didn't listen. No, I didn't, I blurted out, my voice high-pitched and desperate. I wasn't even near it. She's lying. My parents exchanged a glance. I knew what they were thinking. They always thought I was the difficult one, the careless one. Diana was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And once again, I was about to take the blame. But this time, things were different. I had Kronos' cryptic warnings in the back of my mind. I had a second chance, and I wasn't going to let Diana's lies define me again. Diana, I said, taking a deep breath to steady my voice, tell them the truth. I am telling the truth, she replied smoothly, crossing her arms. You were the one messing around near the display table. No, I wasn't, I shot back, forcing myself to meet her gaze. And if I was, how come you're the one who always wanted to move the vase to your room? You've been asking for weeks. You said it didn't belong here. Diana's eyes narrowed slightly, a small crack in her perfect mask. Lydia, enough, Mom said, her tone exasperated. The vase is irreplaceable. Why can't you just own up to your mistakes? Because it's not my mistake, I said, my voice rising. She's lying, and she's been lying to you for years. You just don't want to see it because it's easier to blame me. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, years of being dismissed and overlooked rushing to the surface. I turned to my dad, who was watching the scene unfold in stunned silence. Dad, please look at her. Does she even look upset that the vase is broken? My dad hesitated, his gaze shifting to Diana. She quickly plastered on a pout, but it was too late. The doubt was already there. Diana, he said slowly, is there something you're not telling us? Diana's face tightened, and I knew I had her. I didn't mean to break it, she muttered, her voice barely audible. It was an accident? Mom gasped. Diana, why didn't you just say so? I didn't want to get in trouble, Diana said, her voice trembling, though I could see the resentment simmering beneath her act. I thought Lydia wouldn't mind taking the blame. My chest felt lighter, a small victory finally in my grasp. Of course I mind, I said, my voice steadier now. I'm tired of being blamed for things I didn't do. My parents looked guilty, though their disappointment seemed more directed at Diana now. Dad muttered something about responsibility while Mom awkwardly apologized to me. But Diana just glared at me, her jaw tight. I knew I had won this round, but it wouldn't be the end. The memory dissolved, and I was back in the swirling void with Kronos. Well done, Kronos said, his voice neutral. But not all ripples create smooth waters. What do you mean? I asked, the sense of unease settling in my chest. You will see, he replied cryptically. Your actions have shifted the timeline, but Diana's resentment now festers in subtler ways. She'll find new paths to undermine you. The question is, will you be ready? I clenched my fists, determination flaring in my chest. Let her try. I'm not backing down this time. Kronos nodded, and the clocks began to spin again, sending me hurtling toward the next moment in my past. The college campus was just as I remembered it, buzzing with energy, late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the quad. My heart ached as I spotted him. Ryan, my college boyfriend, sat on a bench near the art building, scrolling through his phone. He looked just like he had the last time I saw him, his easy smile and warm presence radiating calm. This was the moment. the moment Diana's meddling drove a wedge between us. I approached cautiously, the memories flooding back. I had let Diana's words twist my perception of Ryan. She'd told me he was too plain, too unfocused, and holding me back. I had believed her, and in doing so, I had broken my own heart as much as his. "Hey, Ryan," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked up, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Lydia, hey, what's up?" I sat beside him, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment I had to rewrite. I wasn't going to let Diana control this narrative again. Back then, Diana had cornered me in our dorm room the night before Ryan's birthday. "Lydia, you're too good for him," she'd said, her tone syrupy sweet. "Ryan's nice, but nice doesn't build a future. You need someone who can keep up with you, someone ambitious." Her words had eaten away at me until I started doubting everything about my relationship with Ryan. The next day, I had ended things with him awkwardly and abruptly under the guise of needing to focus on my art. "So, what's on your mind?" Ryan asked, breaking me out of my thoughts. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the man who had encouraged me to pursue my art when no one else did. The man who stayed up late helping me with my portfolio, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I wasn't going to let Diana's voice in my head ruin this again. "I wanted to talk to you about something," I said, my voice steady. "Back then, when we broke up, it wasn't about my art, it was Diana. She told me you weren't good enough for me, and I believed her. I was wrong." Ryan blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Wait, Diana told you that? And you broke up with me because of her?" I nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. "Yes, but I'm not going to let her control my decisions anymore. I know this is sudden, but I wanted to apologize. I care about you, Ryan. I never stopped." His expression softened, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Lydia, you've always been worth waiting for. I never stopped caring about you, either." Ryan and I started over, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself. Our relationship became a source of strength, and I found a new confidence in my art. But Diana wasn't happy. She didn't like losing control over me, and she certainly didn't like seeing me happy. So she found another way to strike. It came out of nowhere. My senior art exhibition, the one that meant everything to me, was a disaster. The night before the opening, someone had tampered with my centerpiece sculpture, shattering it into pieces. I knew it was Diana. I could see the triumph in her eyes when I confronted her. She didn't even deny it. "People like you don't get to have it all, Lydia," she said with a smirk. "You're just not built for it." As I stood in the gallery, staring at the ruins of my hard work, doubt crept in. Was standing up for myself worth it if it meant Diana would keep trying to tear me down? Could I keep fighting her? Or would it always end like this, with her winning and me picking up the pieces? Kronos' voice echoed in my mind. "Each choice creates ripples. Some will be painful, but all will shape you." I took a deep breath. This was my life, and I wasn't going to let her define it anymore. If I wanted to rewrite my future, I had to accept that the past might not change her, but it could change me, and that was enough. I found myself standing in the cluttered living room of my parents' house, staring down at a faded envelope in my hands. It was the letter I'd received years ago from the prestigious Brighton Art Gallery. They had offered me a curatorial position, a job I'd dreamed about during countless late nights in college. Back then, I'd declined the offer. Diana had been at a crossroads in her career, and my parents had made it clear where my priorities should lie. "Family comes first," they'd said. "Diana needs you." This time, I wasn't going to make the same mistake. The memory was vivid. I sat at the kitchen table with my mother, who was dicing carrots for dinner. Diana had just left the room, her voice lingering in the air. "I don't know how I'll manage my event without Lydia's help." "Lydia," my mother said, placing a hand on mine, "your sister has so much potential. She just needs a little push, and you're so good at organizing. That job in Brighton will come again, but Diana needs you now." Back then, guilt had weighed me down like an anchor. I had folded the letter and set it aside, telling myself I could chase my dreams later. But later never came. This time, I sat at the same table, the letter still in my hands. "No, Mom," I said firmly. I'm taking the job. The room went silent. My mother's knife paused mid-chop. Lydia, don't be selfish. Your sister. My sister is a grown adult, I interrupted. She doesn't need me to hold her hand. I've spent years putting her first, and I'm done. This is my chance, and I'm taking it. When Diana returned, my mother wasted no time filling her in. Diana's reaction was as dramatic as I'd expected. You're leaving? She said, her voice rising. Now? Right when I need you? How could you? Because it's my life, Diana, I replied, my heart pounding. And I'm done putting it on hold for you. Her face twisted in disbelief. You're abandoning us. Brighton was everything I had hoped for and more. The gallery buzzed with creative energy, and I was surrounded by people who appreciated my talent. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I threw myself into my work, curating exhibitions and collaborating with renowned artists. My confidence grew with each project, and for the first time, I felt truly independent. But success came with a price. My parents, hurt by my decision, grew distant. Phone calls turned cold, filled with passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget their roots. Diana, unable to manage on her own, floundered in her career and directed her bitterness squarely at me. One evening, Kronos' voice echoed in my mind. Every choice has consequences. To grow, you must accept the losses. As I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by the fruits of my hard work, I realized something. I wasn't responsible for fixing Diana's life or earning my parents' approval. I was responsible for my own happiness, and for once, I was finally living it. I blinked and found myself seated at the long oak dining table in my parents' house, the clinking of silverware and the low murmur of conversation filling the air. The scent of roasted chicken and wine lingered, bringing a wave of familiarity. It was my parents' anniversary dinner, the one I remembered so clearly, yet everything felt different now. Kronos had rewound me here, back to the evening where I had swallowed my pride and buried my dreams to keep the peace. Not this time. Here's to Diana, my father said, raising his glass with a proud smile. Our golden girl, we're so proud of all you've accomplished. Diana, seated beside me, basked in the attention. She offered a modest smile, but her eyes darted toward me, daring me to speak. I'd heard this toast before, the praise lavished on Diana, the unspoken implication that I was the supporting act in their family play. Thank you, Dad, Diana said sweetly. I couldn't have done it without everyone's support, especially Lydia's. My grip tightened around my fork. Everyone turned to me, expecting my usual gracious nod. But this time, I didn't let it slide. You're right, Diana, I said, setting my fork down. My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. You couldn't have done it without me, because I've spent my whole life cleaning up your messes and putting your needs ahead of my own. The table fell silent. My mother's eyes widened, and my father frowned in confusion. Diana's jaw dropped, her shock quickly morphing into indignation. Lydia, my mother started, her tone warning me to stop. What are you talking about? I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage I had. I'm talking about how, for as long as I can remember, Diana has always come first. Her ambitions, her mistakes, her feelings. It's like my life doesn't matter as much as hers. That's not true, Diana snapped, her voice sharp. You're just jealous because I've worked hard and achieved more. Worked hard? I let out a bitter laugh. You manipulated me into sacrificing my dreams so you could shine. You convinced Mom and Dad I was the troublemaker when you were the one causing problems, and they believed you every single time. My father leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Lydia, that's enough. This is a family dinner, not a place to air grievances. That's exactly the problem, I said, meeting his gaze. You don't want to hear the truth because it's inconvenient. But I'm done being quiet. Diana shot up from her seat, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to listen to this, she hissed. You're just bitter because you can't measure up. Diana, I said calmly, this isn't about measuring up. This is about me finally valuing myself enough to stop being your doormat. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. My mother shook her head, tears in her eyes. Lydia, you don't understand. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, you've always wanted what's best for Diana. I replied, and I let it happen because I wanted to make you happy. But I can't live like that anymore. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. You're being dramatic. Maybe I am, I said, standing up. But at least I'm finally being honest. Kronos' voice echoed in my mind as I walked out the door. Confronting the truth is never easy, but it's the only way to grow. As I left the house, I didn't know what the future held, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I had finally spoken my truth, and no matter what came next, I knew I was on the right path. When I woke up the next morning, the silence was deafening. No text from my mother asking if I wanted to meet for coffee, no calls from Diana feigning concern while slipping in subtle insults. For the first time in years, my phone was completely still. At first, it was a relief. No one was pestering me. No one was demanding my time or energy. But as the hours passed, the quiet started to feel like a weight pressing down on my chest. Later that day, I decided to call my parents, thinking maybe they'd cool down after last night's blow-up. The phone rang once, twice, and then went straight to voicemail. I tried Diana next, against my better judgment. Hey, it's Lydia, I began, but before I could finish, her curt voice cut through. I don't have time for this, Lydia. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the cold rejection sinking in. For years, I'd been the one to smooth things over, the one to apologize even when I wasn't wrong. Now that I'd stood my ground, the isolation felt sharper than I expected. That evening, I sat in my small apartment, the echoes of the argument replaying in my mind. Had I been too harsh? Should I have handled it differently? The weight of their absence was almost unbearable. For all their flaws, my family had been a constant in my life. Now, they felt like strangers. I distracted myself by painting, a habit I'd picked up again since my first rewind. But tonight, the canvas felt empty, my brushstrokes hollow. The loneliness gnawed at me, whispering doubts about whether this journey was worth it. Was this the right choice? I muttered aloud, not expecting an answer. The ticking started softly, then grew louder. I looked up, and there he was, Kronos, with his ever-present cloak and glowing eyes that seemed to see right through me. You're struggling, he said, his voice calm but firm. Of course I'm struggling, I snapped. My family hates me now. I thought these rewinds were supposed to help me fix my life, not tear it apart. Kronos tilted his head. Rebirth is never painless, Lydia. Growth requires letting go of what no longer serves you, even if it's familiar. But I'm alone, I whispered, tears welling up. What's the point of changing everything if it just leaves me like this? Kronos stepped closer, the air around him humming with energy. Lydia, your worth is not determined by how others treat you. Your family's rejection is their choice, not a reflection of your value. True strength comes from valuing yourself, even when others don't. I looked away, his words cutting deep, because I knew they were true. For so long, I'd based my sense of self on their approval. Standing up for myself felt like losing a part of my identity. But maybe it was a part I no longer needed. Then why does it hurt so much? I asked. Because you're human, Kronos said simply. But pain is temporary. The changes you're making will lead you to a life where you're no longer shackled by others' expectations. After Kronos disappeared, I sat alone with my thoughts. His words echoed in my mind, pushing me to see beyond the present pain. Maybe this emptiness wasn't a punishment. It was a space to rebuild, to create a life that was truly mine. The phone buzzed on the counter, and for a moment, I hoped it was my parents or Diana. But it was a message from Ryan, my college boyfriend from the earlier rewind. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Let's grab coffee soon? For the first time that day, I smiled. Kronos was right. Rebirth wasn't easy. But maybe it was the only way forward. The world went blank again, and the ticking glared in my ears. The engagement party felt familiar yet entirely different this time around. The clinking of champagne glasses, the soft hum of classical music, and the murmur of guests filled the grand hall. But instead of dread weighing me down, I felt steady. Kronos had given me one last chance to face this moment, and I wasn't going to waste it. I stood near the edge of the room, watching Diana bask in the glow of attention, my parents trailing behind her like adoring fans. The sting of their favoritism was still there, but it didn't feel crippling anymore. I wasn't here for their approval this time. I was here for myself. Are you just going to stand there all night? Diana's voice sliced through my thoughts. She was smiling, but her eyes gleamed with that familiar edge of condescension. At least try to look like you're having fun. I met her gaze, calm but firm. I am having fun, Diana, and I'm about to make it even more memorable. Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. I didn't wait for her response. Instead, I stepped onto the small stage at the center of the room, gently tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. Excuse me, everyone, I began, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my chest. I just wanted to say a few words. The room quieted, dozens of eyes turning toward me. I could see my parents near the front, their smiles faltering slightly. Diana's fiancé looked genuinely intrigued, while Diana herself seemed ready to explode. I'm so happy to be here to celebrate Diana and her engagement. I started, my tone warm, but deliberate. But tonight, I also need to share something important about myself. I took a deep breath, the words flowing out naturally. For years, I've put everyone else's dreams ahead of my own. I gave up opportunities, my passions, and even my sense of self because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. But today, I've realized that I deserve to live a life that's my own. My parents exchanged confused glances, and Diana's eyes narrowed into slits, but I pressed on. So I want to let you all know that I've decided to leave the family home. I'm going back to the city to pursue my art, to open up my one studio. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a mix of shock and curiosity. My parents stepped forward, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief. Lydia, my father started, but I held up a hand. This isn't up for discussion. I love you all, but I can't keep sacrificing myself for expectations I didn't agree to. It's time for me to focus on what I want. As I stepped down from the stage, I felt lighter, freer than I'd ever been. Diana glared at me, her jaw tight, but for the first time, I didn't care. Kronos had given me the chance to rewrite this moment, and I'd chosen to rewrite myself. The morning sunlight filtered through my bedroom window, warm and comforting, yet something felt different. My chest was lighter, my mind clearer. As I sat up in bed, memories of the engagement party swirled around me. Not the collapse or the whispers, but the version I had reshaped. The one where I stood tall, spoke my truth, and finally chose myself. I checked my phone and saw a message from Diana. That was new. She hadn't texted me in weeks, but now her name sat at the top of my notifications. Hesitant, I opened it. Hey, Lydia, I've been thinking about what you said. I guess I never realized how much I've relied on you and taken advantage of you. I'm sorry, maybe we can talk soon. I blinked, rereading the words. Diana apologizing? That was a first. A cautious smile crept onto my face. She wasn't magically transformed, but it seemed like a step in the right direction. As I scrolled through my messages, another surprise awaited me. One from my mother. Your father and I talked last night. We're proud of you, Lydia. It's not easy to stand up for what you want. We'd like to visit your new studio sometime. I stood, glancing at my art supplies scattered across my desk. The paints, brushes, and half-finished canvases that had once been gathering dust now felt like an invitation. My art studio, the one I'd hesitated to set up fully, was finally taking shape. With the ripples of my choices, I could feel a newfound energy coursing through me. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new book. The thought of my family made me pause. Things weren't perfect. They probably never would be. My parents might still slip into old habits, and Diana wasn't going to change overnight. But I was different. I had drawn a line, and now they knew they couldn't cross it. For the first time, I felt like the author of my own story. Later that day, I headed to my studio. The vibrant city buzzed with life, and I walked through it with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. My art had been selling well lately, small pieces mostly, but the confidence I'd gained from pursuing my dream made me believe I could aim higher. Maybe I'd apply for that gallery exhibit I'd been putting off, or pitch my work to a local magazine. As I worked on a new canvas, painting bold strokes of color that mirrored the fire inside me, I thought about Kronos, the ticking clocks, the rewinds, and the surreal lessons had led me here. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again, but I whispered a quiet, "Thank you," just in case. This was my reset. My world wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And that was more than enough.